I now have the pleasure of introducing our morning keynote speaker, Sanjay Poonen. Sanjay is with VMware and leads the company's end-user computing business, bringing more than 20 years of experience. He's responsible for strategy, products, engineering, and delivery across all of VM's end-user computing solutions. Most recently, Poonen was President and Corporate Officer of Platform Solutions and the mobile division at SAP. Poonen started SAP's analytics business in 2006, led all of SAP's platform solutions, analytics, database, big data, and mobility. Prior to that, Poonen held executive roles at Symantec, Veritas, Informatica, and began his career as a software engineer with Microsoft, followed by Apple. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Poonen.
Appreciate it. Good morning, Sacramento. How are you? Great. I hope you're doing well. It's good to see a standing room here, and I hope you have a great day of the conference. What I'd like to do this morning is just give you a little bit of a sense of how the world is being revolutionized through innovation. Okay. Mobile is just one example of it, but if we could in this morning get you a sense as to why innovation is the lifeblood. There's for many of you who are, remember high school physics, there's a law of Newton called the law of inertia that says a body at rest continues to be at rest and a body in motion continues to be in motion. It's a fundamental principle that you all probably remember from high school physics. And that's very much true about innovation. If you sort of stay static, you're going to die. And that's what's happened to, if you look in IT, there are lots of companies. Some of my favorite lines are some of these lines. Ken Olsen, CEO of DEC, who said, why would anybody need a personal computer? Okay? That's just, never going to exist because everyone's going to go into the office. Okay? Anybody heard of DEC today? They've died. Gil Amelio, okay, CEO of, good person. I was actually at Apple at the time. And his line of Apple sort of stands out. He said, Apple is a ship that's leaking. Okay? And my job is to guide it to the right harbor. Okay? Now, you know what happened to Apple, and Gil, he left, and Steve Jobs came in and changed it. So we're living in very interesting times, and I have the pleasure as I talk around the world about innovation. Most often, I sort of joke about this when I describe myself from California. I say in California we have 4 seasons, okay? They are fire, earthquake, drought, and bankruptcy. But the 4th one, good news, is you guys are all doing your part. I'm just excited about the financial position of the state improving. But one of the things that's probably a 5th season in that we can all celebrate is California is respected by the world as a state that is one of the most innovative in terms of so many different things. You think about the Silicon Valley and the extended Silicon Valley being the hub of innovation. People come from all over the world. I grew up in India, spent my first 18 years there, was very fortunate to get a scholarship to come to the United States as an 18-year-old. I grew up in a middle-class family, which for all intents and purposes in the U.S. is poor. I came to the country with $50 in my pocket, out on the East Coast to a college named Dartmouth College, did computer science there, and I wanted to come to California. Why? Because I'd heard of Apple. I'd heard of all these great companies. And there's so many of you who are immigrants or first-generation immigrants like myself who have made your careers here. You think about innovation in so many different forms of what we're going to talk about in mobile. And that's really what we need to celebrate in terms of how we think about things going forward. So when you think about innovation, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Thomas Edison, whether it's Steve Jobs, this is what is changing the world. And as every one of you think about your careers in your individual locations, what I want to motivate for you today is that you can be an innovator. An innovator doesn't have to be just a Steve Jobs. It's how you think about product, how you think about process, how you think about people. And those are the kind of the things I'm going to cover today. We've been fortunate at VMware to be ranked among the top 10 innovators by Forbes. They do a ranking every year. Many of you probably have not heard of VMware, so I'm going to give you a very quick tour of what we do. We're probably in IT one of those less known names, but one of the fastest growing software companies. Certainly those of you who are deep in IT and certain infrastructure probably know us well. But these are some of the names that are, I believe, going to shape the next few decades of IT. What I'm going to talk about today are three aspects of innovation, okay, in this keynote. And probably every one of you think about product, and that's important. I'm going to cover that fairly quickly. But, you know, one of the things for those of you who were at business school, you probably went through this organizational behavior class, OB, which is typically called, and you think, you know what, that's the soft stuff. Who cares about the soft stuff in life? It's really about the hard stuff, which is finance or product and so on and so forth. My experience in 20 years of IT and also certainly the last 10 years in executive management is the soft stuff is the hard stuff, okay? And the hard stuff is often the soft stuff. I often reflect at the end of my day how much of my time has been spent actually being sort of a psychiatrist or a psychologist helping teams get along, okay? Or helping figure out, you know, why is one team fighting with the other? Or how do we make sure that we hire and retain and recruit and grow people? So we'll talk a lot about product and process here. In fact, I think that to me is even more motivational in terms of how we think about innovation. First off, as you think about product, I want to just mention a few case studies, because it's always good to learn from case studies of great innovation that's happening across the world in different parts of the industries, but I picked a few that are in state and local government. I think City of Detroit was the first one to do this. Many cities and states have started to do this since then, so I don't think that the idea is completely unique. But, you know, if you think about what's unique about this device, you know, called a mobile phone, for the first time, okay, there is more computing in this device than the first spacecraft that went to orbit in the 1970s, okay, just so you know. And actually, it's the same thing's happening in cars today. There's more software in that car. And it has things in it that didn't exist in a computer for decades. Think about it. It has a camera. The first computer didn't have a camera. Almost the first smartphone had a camera. It has GPS. It knows where it is. It's untethered. It can do things like, for example, voice recognition, whether you have Siri or whatever your favorite voice recognition tool is. And when you think about that from a design thinking perspective, rather than, you know, what would this device do to just check your email, there's amazing things. So what City of Detroit did was, hey, you know, we don't have enough people to actually go and check the roads. Let's get the citizens working for us. They built an app that allows you to take a picture of potholes and send it into a central place. All of a sudden, you had the entire city starting to work for them. The city of Rio in Brazil followed that same idea during Carnival, and then preparing for you know, the various different events that you know are coming up in the city of Rio, whether it's the World Cup or the Olympics. They began to get the city citizens to feed back ideas into a central cockpit of what some of the things were happening that they weren't happy about with a just simple hashtag. And they found out that people were very, very upset about smell in a particular area, okay? And it turned out that just, you know, a particular area needed to have the trash more, you know, picked up more often. And it led to a lot of citizen, you know, feedback that was positive. So whatever the idea is, there are simple ways in which you can get the entire community starting to work for you. And the whole idea is to think with that sort of design thinking mindset. Design thinking is a very popular way in which you can build applications by which you ask yourself, is an application or a use of a solution viable? Is it feasible? Okay, and can it actually have the ability to be scalable? So these are the ways in which you can do things. I'm going to now play a video in the second second case study I have of how the city of LAUSD school district is actually revolutionizing themselves through mobile. So if we can go to the next slide and turn up the volume for
LAUSD is the second largest school district in the country, and we're embarking upon an organizational mission around providing at least one electronic device for every student in the district. Many of our students do not have access to the internet outside of school. And one of the things that we're really pushing for is to close this digital divide.
Common Core Technology Project is about a one-to-one or blended environment, depending on how you define it, for all of our students, from the obvious things like the day-to-day instruction to the not-so-obvious things like digital access and technology access. We also feel a deep commitment to ensuring that our teachers and principals and parents have the professional development and education they need to actualize all of this in the classroom. Before, it was just a textbook and whatever our department created together as a group. Where now I'm searching everywhere for information because I know that just a single paper is not going to be enough for my kids. They want more. They want videos. They want sounds. They want clips. They want to see the whole picture.
With technology, it helped us evolve and created more resources for us to learn different ways and actually learn something instead of just relying on the teacher. Using a mobile device definitely changed my perspective of technology and actually my learning environment.
It's nonstop learning. We have students that are able to go out into small groups, take their devices with them, do work outside of the classroom. It actually expands the walls of the classroom. It's wireless now, right? It's wireless. There are no walls now. And the learning is continuous. So I think the number one game changer is learning never stops. We always knew it didn't, but once you left the desktop stayed there, and it was over pretty much. Now, when children are working together and they're thinking about something, they have their devices and they can automatically go right to it, right? So it's nonstop learning. There are no questions that they can't answer, or at least I would say inquire about.
Well, the goal as an educator and even a parent is to get your students and kids to the next level, give them a leg up so they can do much better than you did. Set the goal much higher for them, set the bar much higher for them. And like I said, for us, it was technology. It didn't exist back when we were kids. It's part of their culture. So these cultural foods are amazing, but it's going to enable us to set the bar higher and get them a higher place to launch from.
For us, we need partners who are in the trenches with us, who understand our mission, who understand how we will be successful. We're using a mobile device management platform by AirWatch. What mobile device management will allow our teachers to do is lock students out of certain applications or give them access to others. It also allows us to track our devices. And so these assets will ultimately leave our school buildings, and we want to be able to know where they are, and we also want to be able to have reporting around how much they're being used and what they're being used for.
I feel very strongly that this is our kids' civil right. This is not, to me, an add-on, an extra. It would be nice if they had this technology. This is something that is owed to them. If we really believe it, we're saying that we're preparing them for a world that we can't even imagine. We have no choice but to make it happen. And so to do that, we have to put all those safety and security pieces in place so that the adults in the system can rest assured that that part is taken care of so we can get to the meat of this project, and that's Common Core, innovation, creativity, and 21st century skills.
We selected AirWatch because we like the direction they're going in terms of building a platform that's scalable, agile, and certainly responsive to the needs of our students.
So that gives you an example. Now, certainly it's in education, but you can extend that. I love that line from Bernadette Lucas where she says, education and mobility is the civil right of kids. It just warms my heart. And that's in the same way in which you think. You can extend that same metaphor to citizens. It's our civil right to actually provide ways in which all of us, the citizenry, can actually operate a lot more effectively and efficiently. We were very fortunate as we thought about what we were going to do to innovate in this area. VMware, about last year this time, we acquired this company, AirWatch. They've got a booth outside. I encourage every one of you, all 600 of you, should go and stop by their booth. It's the leader in mobile management security. So if you think about what you did in the PC world to secure your laptop with like a Symantec or a Norton or McAfee, it's the exact same solution that secures and manages your devices so that you can ensure that as you think about your employees or your extended organizations, you got that level of security that's going to be sacrosanct. In the interest of time, I'm not going to play the next video, but we have similar case studies of lots of innovation we're doing in the data center. What I'd like to do is just give you one other case study and then just move on. As we know, it's a tough time for water in this state. And one of the case studies that we've in VMware been very, very fortunate to cultivate is the Department of Water Resources. What VMware has done traditionally over our 15 years is save people money. I mean, there's probably a total of $40 billion that we've saved in capital expense and operating expense by allowing people to run their data centers more efficiently. Put very simply, we invented this technology called virtualization. And if you don't know what virtualization, let me make it very, very simple to you so you can explain this to your grandmother, so to speak. If you've got a whole bunch of empty glasses of water here, okay, half full glasses of water, and I decided, hey, listen, the more efficient thing, rather than have each of you take half empty glasses of water, half empty bottles of water, I'm going to have one big jug of water, and you're going to have your empty glasses, and you're going to come to me each time you need it, and I'll pour out. I'm going to probably save water, because each of you are going to probably drink that half bottle of water and throw it out. Okay, that's in essence what happens in data centers. There's lots of unutilized capacity that's just wasted. It's power that's wasted, it's compute time that's wasted, and we make it more efficient with this technology called virtualization that just pools a lot of the resources, does it in software, and in essence, we've had people write letters to us saying, I just want you to know, small little mom and pop shop, you have helped me save millions of dollars in electricity bills over a 4 or 5 year period. And certainly that's what we found here in the California Department of Water Resources. They've saved, I think, of the order of 40% in CapEx, 35% in OpEx, and then a significant amount in electricity bills and cooling bills in terms of running the data center. And for a department now where the entire state is thinking about efficiency in the context of water, here's an example of an agency that's working well. So we help many of these businesses run better, and that same advantage of what we've done in the data center is what we're stretching into the end user world. We have a very short, I'm not going to be talking a lot about VMware. I did not want to make my speech a big commercial, but I just want to give you a sense of how we think about innovation, because we have been very fortunate to be that fastest growing software company in IT. We've grown from 0 to 6 billion in 15 years, and it's really because every year as a management team, I'm part of the executive team, we keep asking ourselves, how do we disrupt ourselves again? Okay? And there's a great book written by Clay Christensen, a professor of mine at Harvard Business School, that basically talked about the innovator's dilemma. And it talks about how great companies, and it could be great organizations too, ultimately get to a state of languish or a state of irrelevance. We talk about DEC or many other companies because they're not thinking about disrupting themselves. They're not thinking about disruptive innovation. In fact, they think about innovation with a sense of, like, listen, we've got to protect the status quo. And if you're not thinking about disrupting yourself, you're probably going to get disrupted by somebody else. You just look at what's happened to the music industry by Apple, iPod, iTunes, and so on and so forth, to the telephone industry, to the movie industry, the media industry, and that's going to happen the same thing in public sector. So what we've sought to do is to say, listen, the same thing we're doing with servers, we can do in storage and networking. We call that definition the definition of a software-defined data center. And we believe as that evolves, many of you are going to think about putting your applications either on-premise or in the cloud. And we think it's a world of a hybrid cloud where some of you, especially regulated industries, are going to want to have data on-premise, some in private clouds and public clouds. And we've innovated here now an infrastructure as a service offering that's state-of-the-art that many of you hopefully are considering. And then the final piece of it is to ensure that that end-user world, whether it's desktops or devices, you can manage and secure in a fairly seamless way. Our product portfolio, if you kind of look at this in the one chart here, describes what we're trying to get done all the way from data center to device. Once you've got your infrastructure typically fairly well managed, you can now ensure that you're saving money, you're automating many of those processes, and virtualization certainly helps you do that. But then the end user world allows you to stretch from what I describe a desktop to a Tesla in a very seamless way. Because if you think about that world today, it's changed significantly from what it was 15 years ago. Mobility has become the grand revolution that's changing everything, the way in which we think about our lives. The world of users is changing completely. Where you may have spent a lot of time into a desktop or a laptop, how many of you came to this conference with just a tablet or a phone? Okay, that's 70% of you. If I did that same poll 10, 15 years ago, all of you probably have laptops here. I see many of you are probably tweeting or taking pictures or answering your email. Most conferences I go now, people's heads are down. It's just a compliment, I guess. They're doing their email or maybe tweeting something I'm saying. But that's the world we live in. And today, there's, like I said, there's more software in the modern car than the first 1970 spacecraft. So if you think about your car, it's really one big telephone or one big computer, right, rather than just something on wheels. The world of applications is becoming on-premise and in the cloud. And today, if you thought about storing data, typically you may have said, well, the structured data in the past was in Oracle, the unstructured data was in SharePoint. There's not a CIO I talked to today who doesn't ask me for sort of that simplicity of a Dropbox, but something with a lot more security, so that you can ensure that as documents are left there, if your employees leave, they aren't just leaving in some public cloud. And certainly in the state of California, we're within the US, but if you go outside the US, there's a huge amount of concern about data that's sitting just in a place where you don't have the security that you need around it. So we looked at this and said, listen, we want to be that company that can provide you a management security layer across all of these pillars, whether it's the desktop, if you're doing things like virtualization of a desktop, VDI, we're now got the best solutions in that area. In mobile, like I said, go and take a look at the AirWatch solution. They've got a booth there. They're the leader in management security around mobile. And then the third is being able to share content in a way that's, I described, as simple and secure as being able to just share a file. And all of this needs to be premised by some underlying things that you do that ensures that things just work together. We call these a sense of workspace services. So things like identity, things like catalog, all of those things, just for those of you who are deep in IT, that's a place where we just ensure that the glue that pulls it all together ensures you've got things like single sign-on very easily managed together. Now, our perspective is that all of this needs to come together in a mobile cloud architecture. So, and that's the fundamental innovation. You can't be thinking about this in a very thick client-server world. 50 years ago was all mainframe. Then the world moved from mainframe to client-server. But everything we think going forward is going to be driven by these two words, mobile first and cloud first. So as you think about your applications that are being built, my encouragement to you is think about what they would look like on a form factor that looks like this, as opposed to a form factor that's 24 by 680 or whatever in a laptop. Because most often, certainly the younger generation is going to be thinking about applications on this type of form factor. Same potentially with tablets. We think that the world of tablets and laptops are going to start blending and merging. You're already starting to see that with Microsoft, Apple, and many of the others. The weight right now between a Mac Air and an iPad is slowly starting to come close together. And we think going forward, many of the mobile-centric workforce, and when I say mobile, I don't mean people who just have devices. I mean people who are on the move. Mobile means on the move. So if you're on the move, you could have a very thin computing Chromebook, for example, or a laptop. It needs to be that single pane of glass where whether you start off on a desktop or a laptop, you then pick up a tablet or a phone or get into your favorite car, your applications, your data, your content is all served to you. Now, this world of machine to machine is also going to be huge because the world of sensors and the Internet of Things is going to fundamentally change things in a very novel way that will make our lives more productive. Let me motivate for you how this could be transformational in your personal life. Okay? Prior to coming to VMware, I've been there for the last year. I worked for, as Scott mentioned, a European company, SAP, that all of you probably know. And one of the things I hated about my job was being in California working for a European company. Because it's like the worst time zone you could pick, okay, to do calls with Europe. It's like the furthest out there. And I'd have calls that started often at 5 o'clock in the morning. So no problem, I set my alarm clock for 4:45. I'm not going to drive into the office. I'm going to take the call from my home office, okay? So I wake up at 4:45, I pick up my, my smartphone, I get to my calendar, and somebody overnight has canceled that meeting. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, what idiot cancels a meeting overnight? I could have slept till 6 or 7, right? But I woke up at 4:45. Now think about this. Imagine if your calendar could communicate to your alarm clock and automatically reset your alarm clock based on the meeting being canceled. So it's absolutely possible. In fact, when I showed this first scenario, one of my engineers said, geez, I can build that app tomorrow. Simple, it's easy. And the alarm clock's not actually on my phone. It's a separate alarm clock, but that's on the internet, okay? That's the world that we are living in where fundamentally, so then I get on my day, the alarm clock shifted naturally to 6 or 6:30. I'm notified on my phone that perhaps, the train is late, and my air pressure on my tires of my car is low. Again, all on my phone. your phone becomes almost the remote for all machines, right? That's the world we're going to live in. It's already happening with Teslas and many of the, but if you think about how that can transform many of the high-value, expensive equipment in public sector, where every one of these expensive machines are going to be on the internet. You'll need a management and security layer to manage them. That's what we at VMware AirWatch do very well. But you can then get the data out of that, which is going to be a treasure trove of information that helps you run those much more efficiently. So this is going to be huge. We think the Internet of Things is a big opportunity for every one of you. Certainly our play in that is going to be to manage and secure billions of such devices. And as we do that, I think one of the things that you're going to find is increasingly IT moves from this sort of systems of record, which is all about efficiency, to systems of engagement, which is all about effectiveness, right? Organizations move from being hierarchical to being a lot more about teams. You become a lot less driven by rules-driven ways of doing things, but you become a lot more context-driven. This is the entire world of mobile and social. If you are a command and control type of culture, which we're going to talk about in a second, you're probably going to get obsoleted out. That works very well in the military, okay? But today, everything is about contextual, teamwork, sharing. How do you get the best ideas? Speaking of another mobile sort of, idea, not again in public sector, but in healthcare. Healthcare is another industry, by the way, that's being transformed tremendously by mobile. One of the things that you love about doctors is they're incredibly smart. My mom's a doctor. What you don't like about them is their handwriting's terrible, okay? Their handwriting sucks. But if you could now with Siri or with voice recognition have a doctor have all the greatest legibility, speaking, transforming that, collaborating around an x-ray that they collaborate with another doctor, secure through HIPAA, all through a phone, okay, walking into an office, looking at all the electronic medical records through a mobile solution, sharing that. Today I even heard about, or a couple of months ago, I heard about an application that a small startup is building to actually let you take a picture of a potential lesion or some kind of lump that you might have in your skin that you might think is cancerous. It takes the picture, it sends it to a group of doctors, the doctors can consult, and all they probably need to do is just get a first impression. You don't have to actually physically go to the hospital, all being transformed through that sort of collaborative notion of what mobile and social does for us. And that's phenomenal in terms of the way in which we're going to be thinking about innovation in the future. So lots and lots of product innovation. And my encouragement to you as leaders in this area, every one of you, even if you're not the person who's building these applications, think like a design thinker, which means, listen, how can I take what's the simple way in which people use these solutions and have the capabilities that are in a phone? Things like voice recognition, things like GPS, things like a camera, transform the way in which my customers are going to use a mobile solution. Let's talk a little bit about process. So the next two areas I'm going to cover very quickly are what I describe the soft areas. And for me, it's actually I'm more passionate. As you can tell, I'm a passionate person. But I'm even more passionate about the next two areas than I am a product, even though I'm a product person at heart. Because like I said, the soft stuff is the hard stuff, and the hard stuff is the soft stuff. It's very important as we think about innovating in process. One of the first things I encourage every one of my teams is to keep the customer at the core of everything, okay? There's lots of large organizations that just go astray because somehow along the way they've lost their focus on the customer. And everybody says this, but when you actually can make this a part of your practice, we made this a diligent aspect of what we did at SAP. It became so radical that today, if you look at the SAP ads that are on airports, it doesn't even see SAP. We talk about how businesses transform themselves, or the best run businesses, or the best run organizations. So our stories were the best stories that our customers actually were using our solutions. And that's how seriously we took it. We have the same type of focus at VMware to make sure. And whether you're a large organization or a small organization, focus on the customer. It could be a citizen, it could be certainly in some cases potentially even an employee. Secondly, think strong and hard about ecosystem being multipliers, okay? There's a famous line that I like about Archimedes. He said, listen, give me a point on in a seesaw, in a fulcrum, so to speak, and I can move the world. So you think about the entire earth, it's huge, it's gigantic, it's extremely heavy. But he was saying, listen, I can sit on the other end of that seesaw and balance the world. And you know that I love playing this game with my kids. I got 3 kids, an 8-year-old girl and twin 4-year-old boys. I can put all 3 of them on one side. I'm pretty heavy, I'd like to lose a little weight, but you just have to find that right spot in a fulcrum to balance it. It's just simple. You can do the same thing with an earth. And the whole idea there is leverage. And you don't have to be a big organization, but if you've got leverage as a small organization by thinking about who is your ecosystem that multiplies it. The beautiful idea of that city of Detroit example was the mayor, whoever sort of built that app in the first case, said, my ecosystem are the citizens. And all of a sudden, I got a whole citizenry working for me almost practically for free. So think long and hard about the multipliers that could actually drive your ecosystem. And then, I think that increasingly, great organizations start building a culture where they manage by data and not by gut, okay? I love this sort of, descriptor at the bottom. There are 2 types of people. People who, are sort of highly paid people in an organization. Sort of my code name for hippo. How does a hippo think about, the way in which they manage themselves? By their gut, okay? How does a person who's a data scientist think about how they manage themselves? By data. And I love that little line. In God we trust, everyone else brings data. So as you think about your own management philosophy, it's going to be very easy for you to say, well, my instincts tell me this, my gut tells me. That's important. Don't lose that. But the most important thing you can do is ensure that you can follow that by saying, what does the data say? And when you can build that culture where you obsess, you hound for the data that actually shows you stuff, you actually build an organization that is actually measuring and managing. You can't manage what you don't measure. Now let's talk a little bit about people as I wrap up my keynote, because this is probably, for me, sort of the creme de la creme, the top of the cake in terms of how you can think about innovation. Product innovation is what everybody thinks about. We celebrate examples like Apple or Tesla, or whoever have you. Process innovation is also very, very important, because you can improve your processes and make yourself more efficient and effective. People innovation is very tough, because it goes to the core of our character, right? Let me tell you, first off, most often, people look at organizational success, whether it's in the profit sector, in companies or nonprofit, and they say, listen, how do companies create sustainable shareholder value or sustainable value for their stakeholders, whether it's public sector or private sector? And often, you people think, well, it's because they got great product, or they've got fantastic customers. Study after study has shown, this is actually a study done 20 years ago by a set of professors at Harvard Business School called the service profit chain. And they examined companies who were consistently successful over decades, and they found that at the core of that sustainable shareholder value or stakeholder value were happy employees, okay? And engaged employees, in fact, served customers really well, who in turn drove shareholder value. And you think, listen, what do happy employees got to do with anything? Okay, at the end of the day, happy employees, yeah, they work pretty well. But in service-oriented industries, and much of public sector is service-oriented, you can't do enough to ensure that your employees are engaged. And especially if you're a manager or a leader, you owe it to ensure that you've got engaged employees. And this is more than just sort of the occasional pat in the back. It means that you as a leader have to think about the way in which you build an organization where you obsess about talent. You're always looking to ensure that, if you've got a limited headcount, you're looking for the best people, and then when you have them, you're coaching and grooming them. And that has to become part of our practice. When I joined VMware last year, this time, my group had the highest attrition and the lowest morale, okay? People thought that end-user computing at VMware was sort of, a redhead stepchild. With all apologies to those of you who are red-haired. I say that and somebody stands up and says, why are you calling me a stepchild? But anyway, that's a saying that many of you know about. But nonetheless, in some senses, you look at that and say, well, okay, the problem is leadership, the problem is strategy. This was the picture I put up at my first all hands. I said, listen, it doesn't matter where we're going, it doesn't matter how we're going there. The most important thing I want to get across is this question from the book Good to Great. Who's on the bus? Okay? And once you've figured out the who questions, it's much easier to figure out the how and the what. Most organizations run to the what and the how and the where. Where are we going? What's the strategy? The more important question is who's on the bus. And whether you've got a 5-person organization, a 50-person organization, or a 5,000 person organization? The most important question you got to obsess about is who's on the bus. I often sit down with teams of mine, small teams that have 5 people, and they tell me I don't have enough headcount. I use this example. I said, okay, you've got 5 people. Imagine you're in a basketball team, okay? And at the end of the half, it's the end of the half, it's halfway through the game, you go to the coach and say, listen, I just can't win this game, okay? The other team's got Shaquille O'Neal, or they got Yao Ming or somebody, 7 foot. Would you mind changing the rules and giving me 6 or 7 players, okay? And then I will win the game. What would your coach typically say? Sorry, the rules are the rules. Right, you got 5 players, but I've got an idea for you. Why don't you bench one of your talent and bring in your Yao Ming, and now let's see how you can do things, right? And I'm not trying to say that this is a pitch to say all of you need to lay off your people. But most often, when you look at your 5-person team, what you need to ask yourself is when you get that first open head count, when you're going from 4 to 5, are you hiring and recruiting the best possible talent? And when you have that person in, how are you ensuring that you're making them a high-performance person? That's your responsibility as a manager and a leader. And not often people take that for granted. Let me give you another example of where people are extremely insecure about some of this stuff, right? It's the way when you think about servant leadership. I love this quote. For those of you from India, you'll probably recognize this person's face. His name is Rabindranath Tagore. He was a freedom fighter from India and a great poet. He wrote this line, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. Right? And it basically is a great 3-liner that talks about how we could celebrate a servant leadership mindset. And this is sort of foreign because most people think, listen, if I'm a manager, the job of the employee is to serve me. The job of the employee is to make me look good. I'm going to turn that on its head and say, if you're a manager or leader, your job is to serve your employees. Let me make this more practical. And this is a radical concept because most people don't view management and leadership from that lens. If you think about yourself as a parent, okay? As I mentioned, I'm a parent of 3 kids. And I love running with them because, I love sports and I want to see them going faster. And, there's a little bit of pleasure when, I run and I beat them. But imagine if you're a parent and someday, very soon, they're going to beat me. I'm just getting slower and slower as I get older. But imagine as a parent, if, they get to 12, 15, or whatever have you, and you're extremely jealous about the fact that your daughter or your sons beat you in a race. I mean, you think to yourself, what kind of parent are you? I mean, you got to celebrate the fact that your kids are doing more than you've ever done in life. Okay, now let me ask you that. Why does that not translate into the workplace? A manager is jealous of the employee because the employee is doing really well. They want to put the employee under their thumb. They want to make sure that the employee doesn't get the glory, that they get the glory. They want to grab the glory from their employee and make sure that they are the ones they're very jealous when the employee goes and talks to their boss. These are all the signs of insecurity. Your job as a leader is to ensure that you've not just hired the best team, but you build people who can one day take your job, right? There is no success without successors. And that comes from a mindset where you've obsessed about servant leadership at all levels in the organization. Let me end with this quote. Nelson Mandela is certainly one of the world's heroes. And for every one of you in leadership, as you think about innovation, probably the most important thing you can do in an organization is, in essence, replace yourself. Okay? The beautiful thing about Nelson Mandela's story is that for 27 years he was in prison. But the movement just kept going on. It was not dependent just on Nelson Mandela, right? And this line probably says it all. Lead from the back and let other people believe they're in the front, right? And when you do that, you start finding that a culture of leaders starts to develop within your organization where over time you can just sit back and just watch this organization grow. And that's probably much, much more important than product innovation. Great companies fail often because once the leader's gone, there is no successor to be able to take that to the next level. So as I wrap up, let me ask you guys, okay? In this mobile cloud era, who's the most important people who are going to drive that agenda? Is it the Steve Jobs? Is it the Teslas of the world? The Thomas Edisons? Who do you think it is? All right, every one of you. Thank you very much. Should we wrap up, or do you want to take a question or two? I was told to take 15 minutes, but I think we've got 2 or 3 minutes. Is there any question that you'd like to ask me? I've got probably time for 1 or 2 questions. I wanted to make sure I make this interactive a little bit. And if there isn't, I'll take my presentation to be abundantly clear. All right, well, there doesn't look like any show of hands. I just encourage you, if you can, hopefully this is a little motivational to be thinking about innovation from the context of product, process, and people. Thank you very much.